guys, super excited to be with you all today. I am going to talk about anger. It is one of the stages of grief, as we've discussed in our previous podcasts, and how to deal with anger. What is anger, and how do we deal with this emotion? Is it good for us? Is it something that we need to avoid? Is it dangerous? Something that we need to understand regarding anger, because it will be one of our stages of grief, is that anger has a tendency to also be something positive. Now, I want you to pause for a moment, but anger could be positive. Anger has a tendency to alert us to any possible danger that's around us. It could alert us even when it comes to a physical danger in our lives. It can also motivate us. Anger is not completely negative. It helps us point out brave truths in our lives. So sometimes we have a tendency to look at anger from a very negative standpoint, and we tend to push it away. And if we don't deal with anger, it can come out with irritability. It can come out as aggressive, harsh, critical, judgmental towards others, or even ourselves. It can come out in a cynical way. It can come out in the form of bitterness or even physical tension. Sometimes anger can come out in passive aggressiveness. It can get out, but not so directly. And it is not healthy for our soul. So it's important for us to address this emotion called anger. Anger is a powerful force, and it can sometimes begin to create internal conflicts in our lives. Sometimes it's hidden. And when we hide this anger, it can come out like a powerful fuel. Have you ever felt yourself getting angry and it almost feels like somebody just ignited you? When we don't know what to do with anger, it can be very destructive, not only outwardly, but also internally. It could cause inward destruction, fragmentation, or it can fuel us. It could be positive too, because it can fuel me, and it can lead me to even heal. It could lead me to a wholeness. Anger is not necessarily a negative emotion. It can actually lead us to come out of our own passivity. It can be a healthy expression if we know how to deal with it. Now, in our society nowadays, we have a falsehood when it comes to anger. We tend to suppress it. We tend to deny that we have anger, because on the other side of the spectrum, we try to maybe perhaps express it in an aggressive way. So we are either A, suppressing anger, or ignoring anger, or avoiding the fact that we are angry. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have this aggressive way about us when it comes to anger. And in the middle of that spectrum, we need to understand that anger doesn't come alone. In the middle of these opposite sides, whether you express it and you explode, or you're suppressing it, in the middle, there are all kinds of emotions that are entangled with anger. In the middle, there is a healthy way to express anger. We got to come back to the middle. Now, when we have a healthy amount of anger, it is good. It's a God-given emotion. And sometimes we'll feel the anger in our physical bodies. But it's how we process it. It's how we deal with anger that is important. It's important for us to understand that anger is something positive, because I can look at anger and say, I'm angry about something, but it can lead me out of passivity. So it's got its positives too, because anger can lead me out of being passive. Somebody who does not deal with anger can become passive, can become a victim of their own circumstance, can become helpless and feel like they're helpless. They can't do anything about it. So whenever you feel this anger, it can actually lead you to come out of this victim mentality and say, no more. I've been hurt, but I'm going to come out of this and I'm going to be a joyful person. I'm going to come out of this and I'm going to become a better person. Do you see how anger in the middle of the spectrum can actually be something positive for you? You need to befriend anger. Anger should not be looked at from a negative context. You need to know how to process anger. We are all going to feel angry. You need to know how to befriend anger rather than pushing it away or rather than letting it take over. Again, we go in the opposite ends of the spectrum. Put anger in its right place. Oftentimes I want you to think of it as a sandwich, okay? Because this is the way we are trapped in anger. One side of the sandwich, the top bread, is fear. The bottom side is guilt. And in the middle is anger. So oftentimes we have fear and we have guilt. And then anger is trapped within those two. And until we deal with these emotions, we are going to be stuck on anger. It's very important for us to understand that there are other emotions that are involved with anger. Sometimes anger is stuck in us. And why is it stuck? Because there are other emotions that are trapping anger. It could be guilt. It could be shame. And we're shutting it down. Rather than looking at anger, taking the anger and dealing with it, processing it, and then use it for our own good and our own benefit. You have to identify why you're angry. Sometimes we'll feel it physically. The way I feel it personally is I tend to clench my teeth. I tend to grind my teeth. Sometimes our fists are clenched. There's different expressions of anger, but we need to understand that sometimes anger can get us stuck. So how do you access this anger? It can come up in tension. Anger can sometimes be locked up and pushed down because of these fears that we have. And so it's important to address the anger. Sometimes anger has been simmering for a long time. And you know what happens when you simmer anger in a long time and you don't process it correctly? You wind up hurting yourself. You're hurting yourself. Anger has to come out. Sometimes our jaw is clenched. Our hands are there's pressure in our life. We feel like this pressure taking over. And we feel sometimes like you're about to erupt. Have you ever felt that anger? Maybe you're driving and you have road rage and you feel like it's about to erupt like lava. You have to know how to practice dealing with anger so that it doesn't become destructive in your life. There's two parts to anger. Once you get it out, you need to confront it, talk about it, but there's two parts to anger. Oftentimes when we do not deal with the anger, we'll start to feel powerless. We start to feel helpless. But sometimes some of these emotions that are around anger, it could be shame. So I want to highlight something. Fear, shame, and guilt. Those three emotions can be keeping anger locked up. Do you feel shame about something? Do you feel guilty about something? Are you afraid of something? Sometimes anger gets so locked up in these three emotions. These emotions are important for you to identify because you don't even realize that sometimes you are angry and you end up keeping it like a sandwich. It's so locked up. You cannot deal with anger first. You've got to deal with fear. You've got to deal with the shame. You've got to deal with the guilt. Once you unravel those three, then you'll find that oftentimes anger is there. How you deal with anger? Well, pause for a moment. Identify it. Acknowledge it. I'm angry. And rather than you blowing up like this lava, look at anger in the face and say, I'm angry. Acknowledge, why are you angry? And then Find an outlet before you start to hurt others, before you even start to hurt yourself. And you need to use this anger emotion for your own benefit. I will never be that person again. I am coming out of the situation. Use anger for your own good and your own benefit. I am so tired of being in this position. I'm ready to move forward. I'm ready to be healed. And let that thrust you and pull you in a forward motion. But the three emotions that I want you to just think about is, are you guilty? Do you feel shame? And do you feel afraid about anything for that matter? When you unravel those three, when you remove those three emotions, you're going to find something that anger usually is brewing. Have you dealt with it? There's different methods. I like to punch a punching bag. I do. I like to shadow box. I'll do kickboxing. I will exercise. To me, exercise is such an outlet in dealing with anger. You find it. Maybe you have to throw water in your face, almost like to shock your body. Name it. Stop denying it. Stop thinking that it's not there. It might still be there and you don't even know it. Anger, you need to befriend it. That's not to say that you're going to excuse yourself to always be angry, but you need to use it for your own benefit. I hope this podcast was helpful when dealing with anger. Remember, it's one of the stages of grief, and it's time to move forward so that you can become the best version of God-given potential that God has put inside of you, your God-given version. We want you to be the best version, true to yourself, so that you can be healthy and you can have healthy relationships. So we'll see you guys next time.